So we're talking about graffiti today. We're going to talk about defining it, thoughts and feelings about it. I knew there was something else that I said before, and now I can't recall.
If it's art,
Yeah,
how to define it.
yeah.
So I'm going to give you the Wikipedia definition.
Okay.
Graffiti is writing or drawings made on a wall or other surface, usually as a form of artistic expression, without permission and within public view. How does your definition go with that, or what would you say about that?
I define it differently, and I can't think of any other artistic thing that comes to mind that I've changed the definition of from what the definition might be in the dictionary, but I haven't really felt like I've had a reason to look up different art styles in a dictionary before. So years ago, and I don't remember exactly what started it, but I felt the need to, I don't want to say redefine, but clarify the definition. So I ended up with just, at the time, stylized letter structure, and I think we can take the word structure right out of there and just call it stylized letters, which to me changes a lot about that definition. It subtracts a lot. I don't really think it, it adds the word style and it clarifies just letters. And there's a whole lot of other things in that definition, and that definition is really similar to a lot of other dictionary definitions, and also just like regular common use, common thoughts, I guess, that most people would have.
So what made you decide to change the definition?
Well, like I said, I don't feel like I'm changing it, I'm clarifying it, and I think it's because, different dictionaries have slightly different wording of things, and sometimes they'll leave things out. Like, it won't have the thing about legality in there. It'll say drawings or markings, and it goes, some of them go back to the word graffito or whatever, which is like some old Latin or whatever, and they talk about just mark making. So I know that it's never been clarified as just letters. To answer your question, like I said, it was sometime in university, and it was because my involvement in that culture, I really wanted to clarify and have a unified definition because it seems to mean something different to almost everybody. Despite the fact that the dictionary has a definition, it doesn't work because other people have their own thoughts and opinions and understandings of what graffiti is and what it isn't, including people that are involved in that culture. So I try to strip it down to the very basics of what it would be, or what I think it would be, most commonly for the people that actually partake in that culture. I think that when it comes to defining stuff, it's really difficult when an outside source is defining a thing that you take part in, and you define it by your participation. I don't know if that makes sense.
I understand what you're saying, but there's a lot of graffiti, quote unquote, artists who create art or pieces of spray paint in public places that is not just stylized lettering.
And that's why I wouldn't call it graffiti.
But they do.
Yeah, but some people call themselves artists, and you and I would say they're not. Because we think we're artists, so we're defining what an artist is by our participation and what we value. So I guess that's, the only thing I can think of, because I was saying, I've never really had a dispute over another art style. To me, graffiti is an art style, which isn't defined by its legality, and it's not defined by its medium, which is a whole other thing. And I specifically think of letters because of something else that I guess we'll get into in a minute. But I was trying to think of if I looked up the definition of abstract art, I think I know what it would say, or non-objective art, which is the same thing, or landscapes or portraits, styles of art that are not, again, not defined by the medium, it's a style of art. So, I can't think of another way to, because I'm thinking is a drawing a style of art? You know what I mean? Or, because to me that's two different things, a style of art or a genre of art. I don't know how to define it, and then the mediums you use to create that genre of art. Because to me, photography, I think someone could say that's a style of art, but it's not defined by its content. It's just defined by the medium you use.
Right.
Yeah, because you could create a landscape with a photograph or with a camera. You can do a portrait. and so many other things. Anyway, I was thinking of the example would be music.
Photography is like painting, drawing, photography, sculpture, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, sculpture isn't just with one medium, but sculpture is the fact that it's a physical, well, usually a physical 3D thing, but then you have like light sculpture and other stuff too. So there are other things that definitely end up getting, they're not as solidly like defined.
Right. Yeah. Because even drawings can be, drawings can be pencil, they can be pencil crayon, they can be collage, they can be, so everything has it's very, very broad as to how you can do what is considered drawing.
See, drawing with collage to me doesn't make any sense, because I think of drawing as it's line based to me, but then that doesn't make sense either, because if you just did shading and no lines at all, I think of like lines of light, I could say like, oh, that's a light drawing, because I'm thinking of lines, but I don't know, yeah, drawings, I don't know, I was just thinking of music, because it was like, what would some people define as music? And not just like the old crotchety way, like that's not real music, but I mean like if it was just like noise, if it was just fuzz, whereas...
Well, John Cage, right, is an example of music. He's an artist, he's experimental artist, but he's also, got records and is, he is classified as, a lot of people would say as a jazz musician, so with that experimental way. So he's someone who, he probably, I think, would have just called himself an artist, but he also made music.
Yeah.
It was done as music. So, I think things can be really fuzzy and hard to define.
Can you actually look up the definition of music? I should have thought of this before, but I didn't. Because I'm trying to compare, I think, like, in my mind, comparing graffiti to music is what makes sense if we need, like, a reference point, because, yeah, well, I'll get into that. I'm just curious as to what is, like, the simplest definition of music that there is, just like in the dictionary. How does it define music? If it's specific notes being played, or if it's just sound that's like in a pattern, or I'm wondering what the dictionary says.
Vocal or instrumental sounds, or both, combined in such a way as to produce beauty of form, harmony, and expression of emotion.
So expression of emotion, then that could be anything. That could be nails on a chalkboard, and it's creating sound. Whereas I think commonly, most people would not define that as music.
Well, commonly, but you aren't letting graffiti be used as the common...
Exactly. But that's my point. That's why I think it's a good comparison.
Because people within the genre then are defining it, so that's what you're saying.
Yeah, like this...
Because people who are musicians or have some academia training then are more open to a...
I don't think it has anything to do with academia necessarily, but just being involved in that art form. Like, so, I'm comparing it this way even though the definition thing is backwards. So, I feel like with graffiti, the definition is way too broad, and I feel like with the definition of music, it's, the definitions are both really broad, but common use or common understanding, most people think of music as much narrower than I think the definition, and most people think of graffiti as the definition that exists, and I feel like the definition should be much narrower, because it doesn't, so like, oh, this is going to be really hard to explain. I wish I didn't make the comparison now. Well, yeah, music, if we just define, I might be arguing against my own point now, or not my own point, but against the comparison, because music, I would say that most of the time I've thought of it as how it's commonly thought of too. So maybe I am maybe it's a better comparison or a worse comparison, I can't tell. Because yeah, nails on a chalkboard to me isn't music, it's just sound.
But you have noise bands, right?
Well, nails on a chalkboard played in a pattern, then to me that becomes music.
But that's to you, that's not... Because, even, and that's, John Cage is a good example. He did some that's just drips from a tap, right?
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily in a pattern that you might think, because it's jazz, so it's not, jazz is almost anti-pattern, right?
Well, no, but it's,
way.
yeah, I know what you're saying. The pattern is maybe the wrong word, but there's, I don't know what to call it, either a rhythm involved, there's repetition involved, So I think sound without any repetition whatsoever is really difficult to call music. But I don't mean repetition of the same note even. I just mean repetition like if it's 1 second long, I don't know. But then again, there's like a lot of like grindcore bands that have 2-second songs and there's like 5 instruments going at once for they play like 2 or 3 notes and that's it.
And the world's shortest novel is 1 sentence.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that there's a lot of so it's not just me obviously that redefines like genres of things or styles of things. And the reason that I have my definition the way it is, like I said, is to try to narrow it down as a way to create more. I don't know. I don't want to say acceptance. I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about graffiti and the people who create graffiti, and then trying to actually. How do I? I don't know. I don't know if I can explain it without just getting into everything. So, to me, when I talk about stylized letters, it's including a lot of things and excluding a lot of things. And I talk about graffiti as a genre of art or a style of art, whereas the definition I don't think talks about it as a style of art. It just is a thing that is either writing or drawing, which already opens it up way too much to be a style of art to me, because it's way too vague. It talks about the legality of it, and it talks about it being public. And to me, that just it narrows things down too much and makes things too broad at the same time. A lot of people think of graffiti as like, some people think of like bathroom graffiti, almost anything that I would ever find in a bathroom, and typically this isn't a thing that I ever see anymore really, but it's like 80s and 90s crap that's just like, so and so is here, or call Jenny for a good time, and it has a phone number. These things aren't stylized typically at all. And they're just like with a marker or scratched into the thing. To me, there's nothing to do with graffiti. It's not a style of art. It's just someone writing. That's it. Just writing something dumb. And we call that vandalism, and people automatically think graffiti is vandalism, that it can't even be graffiti without vandalism. And then they get tied into this thing. And what I don't understand is how can you call Jenny for a good time the same thing that you could call a beautiful, colorful, amazing piece that's on a train? Because people do call those the same things.
Well, now you're saying that graffiti is a beautiful lettering on the side of a train.
No, it can be.
Yeah,
but when you think of graffiti,
so can Call Jenny could be too. I mean, it has almost a political message. That could very well be it. I mean, granted, it's on a bathroom wall, so that pretty much takes away. I mean, it's the whole thing of it being scope, but. So if you want to take inside a bathroom, something being said, call Jenny for a good time, and then something on a train outside, if those are the two differences.
No, I'm saying the stylized part is the difference. The political thing, the message to me has nothing to do with a style of art.
Okay, well, it kind of sounds like the message had something to do with it.
No, it's just a stereotypical example of how someone wouldn't stylize that.
Mm-hmm.
If they're just writing something like a stereotypical so-and-so is here, or like a stupid poem about farting, usually that's not stylized in any way. It's just pure vandalism with writing. With letters, but there's no stylization, so to me that has no artistic intention even.
So if someone did nice stylized letters, would that not make it vandalism?
But no matter what, it's vandalism.
Okay.
I think you're saying, would it not be graffiti?
Mm-hmm.
So it would, I guess if their intention was to create art, it would just be crappy graffiti. It would just be sucky graffiti, but there's sucky portraits and sucky photography and whatever, and like, or crappy landscapes like that are not any good, right? But if that person's intention was to make a landscape, it still fits into a landscape. To me, lettering in and of itself, like,
no,
the text on a book is not graffiti.
No.
Even sometimes it could be completely stylized, but it's not stylized by hand is one thing. It's a typeface, it's a font.
I meant stylized. If
yeah.
It was inside a bathroom, but it's stylized, is that graffiti?
I would say it would have to be, under my definition of the stylized letters, it's just crappy graffiti. But not in my experience, I mean, not many people take time to vandalize something like with the, I don't know, it's usually a humorous intention in a bathroom. And it's not, that's just one example of a place where I think a lot of misconceptions grow. It's like, oh, this is just like vandalism, and it is, and yet you can have a train being vandalized, and to me, the word doesn't describe both things, because there's no intention in art on one hand, and to me there is a huge intention on art in the other. And then there's everything in between, and this is why I want to try to find a way to create a definition that excludes more things, that includes more things at the same time, because like I said, I have a problem with, I guess, the misconception, because of, I don't know how to, it's like no one can be on the same page, and it's just like, what are we including, what are we excluding, and then there is negative stigma with the genre, or with that style of art. I don't think there's negative, because I'm calling it a style of art, because if it's not art, then to me it's not graffiti, it's just vandalism. You can use any style of art to vandalize, but nobody thinks of it that way, and that's what I think is a problem. So this is why I don't include characters in my definition of graffiti, because characters would be whatever, cartoons or a portrait or a face or a stick man or whatever, right? Well, you could make a realistic portrait, and it's a portrait. That's what it is. It is a portrait. Just because you do it with spray paint doesn't mean it's graffiti. Just because you do it in public doesn't mean it's graffiti. I don't think. If you did it with permission or not permission, I don't think it makes a difference as to what style of art it is. It's a portrait. That's what it is. So where I put the portrait, all of a sudden, then it becomes different. If it's on paper, it's a portrait. But if I do the exact same face, like let's say even in the same medium.
But if you're doing a portrait of a person with spray paint on the side of a building without permission, then that's a bit different. Like to just call it a portrait.
It's still a portrait.
Well, I know you're saying it's still a portrait, and I
Well,
get
it's
that.
not me.
But how is it? Well, no, like because it's done of spray paint and it's on the side of a building without permission, then those are the things that people are going to lump that into graffiti.
Yeah.
That's where someone like me, who doesn't do graffiti, is going to say that's on the side of a building. It wasn't done with permission, and it was done in spray paint. And to me, then why is that not graffiti?
Well, because it has nothing to do with letters.
I know. Well, you're the one who's bringing it's just lettering.
If you talk about, let's say you recognize that portrait as art. Mm-hmm. Let's say that you do. What style of art is it?
I don't know. Well, graffiti. To me.
But it's a portrait.
Yes.
So why is it both? That's what I don't understand. You can't have, if you have a landscape in the background, you have a portrait on top.
But that's like me saying, that's like me looking at a portrait and it's a pencil drawing. That's like me looking at a portrait and it's oil painting. That's like me looking at a portrait and saying, that's all I'm doing is giving it a little bit further definition. And so when I look at a portrait and it's spray paint outside of a building, then it's graffiti.
It's a portrait.
Yes, but so is a pencil drawing.
Yes, it's a portrait done in pencil.
Right,
this is a portrait done in another medium. And the medium isn't defining the art style.
Okay, I hear you.
I understand that this is what we're talking about, because there's that, like all those things you mentioned are what people think of. And to me, like, is that vandalism it's without permission, so it's vandalism. Mm-hmm. The medium doesn't matter. If I had it on paper, and I had this portrait on paper, and then I taped it to your garage door, that's vandalism. Like, it's because I don't have permission to do it.
It's not vandalism if you taped it to my door, because it's not doing any harm.
Okay, so if you take the duct tape off and then it peels the paint off, then it is?
Well, yeah, I guess if you're going to use duct tape and you're talking about...
Or if it's a stencil of a face, or if it's... I mean, we use oil pastels to tag stuff too. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if I'm using oil pastels just to create a portrait, like, it's a portrait. Like, so... Again, legally or illegally, it looks exactly the same. Mm-hmm. So to me, that already should not be included in defining a style of art. Like, it looks...
Okay, but writing is... I can do I've done stylized printing forever and a day. So you're saying everything anyone ever does with stylized writing is always graffiti.
If that was your intention.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, because some people draw a face without the intention of it being art at all.
Mm-hmm.
So is it a portrait? Well, no, because it wasn't even meant to be art. It was just meant to, I just wanted to make a happy face. I don't know, and that's the whole thing with photographs too. So like that's a snapshot. It's just like a family photo. It's not art at all. Well, that's because it didn't have any intention to be art. There was nothing. There was no anything attached to it. Just the intention alone of I don't know how you as a photographer. I don't know. Like to me, it's about a composition first and foremost. And some people are like, oh no, it's about color or it's about lighting or whatever. All those things are present in a photograph. No matter how you swing it, there's always going to be either color or lack of color or lighting or lack of lighting or contrast or whatever. All those elements go into a photo, but that doesn't automatically make it art if you didn't intend on it. We took a selfie and it has great composition and color, whatever. It can have all these elements of design or elements of art without us thinking it's art because we didn't have that intention. Mm-hmm. So I think, yes, if you're writing with stylized letters and stuff, I often say I was doing graffiti before I knew what graffiti was. Mm-hmm. Because my intention was to make it stylized and make it super cool looking and really pretty, but I didn't even know what the heck art was at all in high school, and I had no idea what graffiti was, but my intention was almost the same thing. I just didn't have the word art in my mind whatsoever. Yeah, but back to that example, like I think that the scenario that you laid out is perfect, because to me the legality right off the bat just is a huge problem in defining a style of art. Because you went back to the medium thing again, mm-hmm. right? And if it was like, oh, because it's done in spray paint. Well, what else can we make with spray paint? We can make landscapes with spray paint. They are landscapes. We can make portraits, and they are still portraits. Like you said, oil painting or whatever. But oil painting isn't a style of art. It's what you use to create that style of art. Mm-hmm. Graffiti isn't a medium. So like, it's when you get outside. Again, with the thing with it being in public view, the reason it gets lumped in with spray paint so much is because it is quick, easy, easy to put on an outside like canvas. If it's brick, if it's stone, if whatever, it's so versatile as a medium that it's super easy to do. It's just paint coming so you don't have to use a brush, you don't have to whatever. And people do tons of like straight letters with is a style of graffiti that is done with like paint rollers rather than spray paint. Using paint rollers and like regular house paint, like latex, acrylic, whatever, house paint, and using paint rollers. So I separate it from the medium because what I'm doing, so sometimes if there's like a mural that someone's planning to do either legally or illegally, it doesn't even matter at this point, but they're doing like really intricate letters, they usually draw that first. So to me, when I'm drawing in a black book or my sketchbook or whatever, and I'm planning what I'm going to do on this wall, what I'm doing on paper is the exact same thing I'm doing on the wall. Like this is the plan for that thing. It's like doing like just a preliminary drawing of a figure, and then you're like, hey, I got my pose, and now I'm going to paint it on this canvas.
Yeah, but if you do a preliminary drawing for a sculpture, you're going to do it's not a sculpture, it's a drawing.
Yeah.
So it's not graffiti.
But what is the sculpture of?
It's of whatever you've drawn.
Okay, but that's what I'm saying. We keep getting in this point where I feel like it's mixing up. You keep talking about. Okay, so drawing is not a medium. Okay, to me there's style.
Drawing is a medium. Of course, drawing.
You can. It's not a medium.
No, drawing is a style.
See, and that's where we need a different term because portrait is what? What is a portrait? I don't know how to define it.
It's a style.
Okay, but drawing is a style too. Mm-hmm. And that's what doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. No, there's painting. Okay, so you have like painting and drawing and photography, right? Those are different mediums.
Those are medium-based styles. They're not mediums in itself, right? Because, like, because you can paint with acrylic. Acrylic is like if we go to me. There's like a hierarchy, not a hierarchy, but like I think of it in levels. So I'm thinking visually, 1, 2, and 3. The medium, like singular, would be at the bottom, right? So it'd be like pencil is a way that I can draw, and then draw would be the next step up. So a pencil, marker, ink and pen, oil pastel, chalk pastel, wax crayon. All those things are different mediums that you can use to draw. You can't use those mediums to paint. You can't use those mediums to take pictures. So those are the mediums that to me are on the bottom shelf, or that's just like, again, there's the three levels. And then so we could say those are mediums used to draw. So if drawing is a style of art, you can use drawing to create landscapes, portraits, graffiti. You can't use them to create sculpture. That's a whole, sculpture would fit, I think, down here with, on the same level as drawing, painting. Okay, here's the thing. Whatever this top layer is, whether it be, portraits are defined by what? A face, a figure, whatever. Landscapes are defined by an absence, usually, of this huge, the focus is on the nature scape, whether it be city or like rural or whatever, would be defining a landscape.
But you just had before, you had drawing down here, and then you had the graffiti was up there.
No, graffiti's on the same.
As drawing.
No, it's.
See, I think you're getting confused yourself.
No, I got confused where I said it. I guess if I said it that way, because it's, if we have 1, 2, and 3. 3 is where graffiti would be, because it's, if I'm defining it by letters and letters only, I'm defining portraits by faces only, just as a shorthand. If I'm defining landscapes by only only nature.
Means drawings down here.
Yes, the drawing is down here. So that's why, to me, sculpture is also in the middle, because I could have a sculpture of I could have a portrait that is a sculpture, and that sculpture is made with mediums of whatever, different media. It could be steel, it could be wicker baskets, but it's a portrait that is done through the process of sculpture by this medium. Or it could be an abstract sculpture. So abstract is also up here. Is that clicking?
I understand what you're saying. It's not that it needs to click.
Well, but I mean, how are these two things the same?
They're not the same. That's what I'm saying.
Well, you were saying that drawing is the same thing as a portrait.
No, I'm not.
Well, how do we define? So if drawing is a style of art, what do we call this thing up here?
Drawing is a style of art, and it can be done in a whole ton of different mediums.
Yes, so we've got medium, we have style of art, and what is this top thing called?
I don't know.
Well, we got to call it something, because we're calling it style of art.
Well, it's called. Yeah, I would have just thought it was style. That's how I would have described it.
But we already differentiated that a portrait and a drawing are not the same thing.
No, I know. So I don't know. I don't know what you call it. I'll call it A.
A? Or a content? I don't know. Is that what it, like... Well, a landscape is defined by the content of it having nature, or the opposite if it's a cityscape. Form. Form? Is that...
I don't know. Anyways, why don't you describe the difference between tagging and graffiti? Or why there's the term tagging?
Well, sure, we can go into all those specifics, but I mean, without this thing, we're not going to get anywhere.
Okay,
because this thing... Well, I mean, this thing up here, and for people listening to the podcast, can't see what we're doing, but like we've got a bottom layer, and then a middle layer, and a top layer.
Okay, so in graffiti, what's your bottom layer?
The plethora of mediums.
Okay.
Just like with, that's the whole thing. 'Cause I'm going to go back to, okay, examples of what is on the top layer is portraits, landscape, abstract. I would include graffiti up there too. Portrait, if we keep going with portrait being at the top layer, the layer right beneath it is different. It could be a drawing of a portrait, and then drawing underneath that has different mediums that contribute to what a drawing, to defining what a drawing is. A drawing isn't a photograph. So if we talk about a photograph of a portrait, then, well, okay, what is our medium for a photograph? A camera. You could have tons of different kind of cameras, whatever. Portrait that is a painting has certain mediums that are attributed to painting. So you ask for the question that you just asked me. So if graffiti's at the top, then we've got I feel like, yeah, I feel like there's nothing in the middle other than if portrait is defined by a face, if graffiti is defined by letters, then that middle section, I don't know what that is. So I guess that's, whether you were intending to make that point or not, that's a good point. I don't know what that middle section is. The bottom section is the mediums. And the top section is it being defined by just having letters. But what is that middle thing?
Well, that's why I'm asking where tagging comes in.
So, well, that's tagging, bombing, pieces, whatever, are just different. That's like saying you could have a portrait that's just just flat lines, like a cartoon could be a portrait, and you could have a photorealistic portrait. That's the difference between a tagging and like a 3D wild style piece. They would both fit under the umbrella of graffiti. They're both stylized letters, but one is like flat signature that's again meant to be done with style.
I guess that's what I was trying to bring out is if you're going to have in this second level where you can have difference between drawing and X, Y, and Z, then within graffiti, aren't there different styles of lettering, like within the lettering? I'm staying with your lettering.
Yeah.
So couldn't that be in that second part, is where you would have the different types of lettering, something like that, that equals the same sort of thing as drawing and painting and that kind of thing?
I just realized with that second part, or how to better define that second part, because we go portrait, and then it could be a drawing of a portrait, or a drawing of a portrait, or whatever, a portrait, blah, 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 blah. If I compare abstract to graffiti, well, abstract can be, again, you could have a drawing that's an abstract, you could have a photograph that is an abstract, a sculpture that is an abstract. All those different things in the middle could all be abstract, right? And then the mediums are open to all of those things. Whereas if we're talking, this is a portrait, and it can, I feel like it's like a sideways VLT machine. Like, you've got a menu of different things that you can rotate through to create that thing at the top. And then you've got a menu underneath the drawings of all the mediums that you could use, right? So some things make sense and some things don't. With like I said, with abstract, you can do that with almost any medium. With portraits, you can do that with any medium. With landscapes, whatever. Sculpture becomes a problem, somewhat, because you can't necessarily do it with any medium. Well, that's not true. You can use flat paper and then just crumple it up and make it 3D, but it can't stay flat. Whereas a portrait can stay flat, and it could also be 3D, whatever. So I feel like no matter what style of art we get to, we're going to have some blips that aren't exactly the same across the board. So if I still have graffiti at the top, and then I could do graffiti, I don't know how to do graffiti with photography unless you were to make letters out of prints or something. Because if it's defined by letters, I mean, it's the same thing as like, well, how you would take a picture of someone's face and call it a portrait, right? Or, if you have, that's why to me sculpture is not at the top part, it's in the second part, because you would have a sculpture of a portrait, or a sculpture of landscape, or an abstract, whatever. So you talk about tagging, that's just under the umbrella of graffiti. It's still there, it's just a style of graffiti. Just like with portraits, you could have a cartoon portrait, you could have a photorealistic portrait, you could have a surrealist portrait, and that would be a whole other thing. I don't know. I feel like we went really not off track, but your example again of the legality of the medium, and well, I think that was pretty much the legality in the medium, right? That it doesn't matter, like you said, a lot of people would consider, okay, so I have a portrait, I don't know, for a long time downtown in Saskatoon there was a portrait of Bob Marley in an alley, like super right in the middle of downtown. It eventually got painted over, but a lot of people, that's graffiti, and coincidentally the person who created that did a lot of graffiti, but that was just a portrait. And to me, that it just sits there at the top because it has no letters whatsoever. So we get into these other things of like, does Banksy do graffiti? I don't think so, because I'm not defining it by legality, and a lot of people are not defining it by the. I guess anytime we say legality, we're also talking about where it is, right? That's what makes it legal or illegal sometimes. But I mean, there's so many muralists or artists that do public art that do it completely legally. So then, if they have the placement by itself can't be defining in the style or genre of art, right? Because if they're making a portrait, they're making a portrait. If they have permission, it could be on the exact same wall, but one day they have permission and one day they don't. And to me, that is still a portrait. So I get like, I feel like I almost should have spent time like breaking this down on paper or something for me to write it down and try to like, to create the formula or whatever. So you own a store. If you had like a really decent wall in your back alley and you could commission someone to do a mermaid portrait and like, oh, what's the best medium to do on this brick wall? It's going to be spray paint. Okay? So they're creating a figure for you with spray paint because it's the best medium to use. But you're going to call it graffiti because it's using that medium and it's on that space?
No.
Why not?
Because I commissioned it, and it's to me the graffiti part of it is that it's illegal, that it's not done with permission.
So anything done without permission?
No, I'm just saying, for me, yes, that's what I thought of graffiti. I still wouldn't think, if I see a mural downtown that has been painted with permission, and to me that doesn't look like graffiti. Behind Catwalk, they have
Panther.
yeah, they have their panther.
Yeah.
That's, to me, does not look like graffiti.
Okay, so then I've got two things to say to that. And one, there is a piece behind, I don't know what avenue it is. It's in the alley behind the Penny, behind
Yeah, it's
Infamous.
a skateboard place, yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's that?
Well, that's commissioned, so it's not graffiti.
Even though it's letters. So what style of art is that?
I don't know. I mean, it looks like graffiti. A lot of stuff looks... That's letters. So yes, according to yours, that's graffiti.
Well, not just mine. You don't think that common people would be like, oh, this is graffiti, it's just legally done.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess it looks like graffiti. I guess, to me, when I sat down to come to this conversation, then it was more things that look illegal, that don't look like someone has paid for them to be painted. You go into some restaurants and they have this like horrible stylized writing,
Yeah.
and so what, I'm supposed to think that's graffiti because it's stylized writing?
Well, yeah,
it's
just bad graffiti. But that's the thing with anything. There's a lot of horrible, like horrible murals, horrible portraits, horrible photographs that are commissioned or like they're done, as even like logo design or whatever, right? Like that's I don't think the quality defines any other style of art. And I guess my whole thing is based around this is a style of art, and if it's not a style of art, then what the heck is it? Because what does it fit under? What other type of art does, there are okay. My other example, which I don't know if we'll get into or not, just before I get too far away from it, is that throwing a brick through your window isn't graffiti.
No.
No, it's just vandalism. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm still confused as to what looks like graffiti other than the illegality. So it has to be vandalism.
No, I didn't say it had to be vandalism.
But it has to. Okay, you said it looks like it wasn't done with
I don't
permission.
think illegal and vandalism match.
It's exactly the same thing.
Okay.
Well, are they not? Because I mean, if I'm doing something without your permission, that is. I mean, if I'm altering someone else's property without their permission, that is vandalism. Is that not how we define vandalism?
I guess, yeah.
But but to me, that if I was charged with vandalism, I could be. If I throw a brick through a window, or if I spray paint that window with it doesn't matter on the quality, but if it was a portrait of the Mona Lisa, I'm getting charged with the exact same thing. With a charge of mischief, vandalism.
Yeah, and I would say, yeah, you should.
I know.
It doesn't make sense.
No,
I know,
I'm just saying that.
But I mean, no, you're right. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess for me, when I sat down to this conversation, definitely legal and illegal. That's why I've never understood legal graffiti walls. Because to me the whole interesting thing about graffiti is it was illegal. It was a sort of subculture that had something interesting to say for the most part, except for some things I don't like. But I mean, the whole thing I liked about graffiti was this subculture and this punk attitude and sort of taking things back. When people don't have respect, and especially for historical buildings, and there's a lot of things that really bug me about what different people have done with graffiti. But I mean, so to me, as soon as you have something that's called a legal graffiti wall, they did one up at the university. I thought it was the most asinine thing I'd ever heard of. Like, it just seems ridiculous. So then it's just a bunch of chumps coming out with their spray paint and spraying things. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So I guess then it's just, well, probably they're not doing stylized lettering anyway, so probably it's not graffiti. But I think it was mostly just probably the frat boys, you know, just advertising that there were beer gardens or something. That's probably half the time what it was. But
well, that's like when people go and just paint under a bridge, grad 2004, grad 2016. Like usually it's not stylized and it's not with the intent to be art.
No.
But it is vandalism, and it's using letters to vandalize, and that doesn't count as graffiti to me because there's no artistic intention.
It's true. Like, I understand what you're saying, because graffiti, and in my mind, I use it for good and bad. So I use the same word for good and bad. So I would say graffiti under a bridge, and I would include, you know, the grad 85 or whatever, along with perhaps some really cool stylized lettering, and I wouldn't think twice about it. So I have interchanged, though, you know, use that word for what I would have thought before was like good and bad graffiti. So now, you know, you're sort of saying there's a difference. One's just doing lettering with spray can, and the other one is with intent, which is like what we know with painting and stuff like that, when you're doing something with intent, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I get where you're coming at from that, and I guess, so I understand that part. The part that I still don't understand is how you can then say within graffiti, and I know for people who have only been listening to the podcast, you can't have seen, but with having graffiti at the top, I still don't understand why there isn't a way for portraits or pictures or bubbles or whatever, those things to fit into what graffiti can be.
And I guess because it's at the top and portraits are already at the top next to it. There's something...
I get that. Like, I get that you've done that. I just don't understand why. Like, I get that you've done that, and I know that's probably how you were trying to, like, maybe distinguish it, and so if that's my only distinguishing thing, then I get it. I just, like, how can there be so many other people that define it that way? I mean,
because the dictionary defines it that way. That's why. I think a vast majority of people have their understanding based off the dictionary definition, and then I mean that wiki definition talked about it being in a public place that was not with permission. So in previous dictionary definitions that I've seen, it's never included the permission thing, or like the public, like it's been more public than it has been talking about permission, because they even talked about like cavemen did, like, if you go from like graffito just means mark making on a surface is what it said. Like the most basic one that I can remember was mark making on a surface. Mark making, again, it could be drawing, it could be letters, it could be like writing or whatever, right? I have it at the top because it's a different form, and when I say content, I don't mean theme, but I mean.
But like, couldn't graffiti be the same as drawing, and then you can do a portrait with graffiti?
Well, I don't.
I'm just saying, if you had it there, because if you have it there, then you have like spray paint, pencil, like all the other ways below it.
Yeah, but then you could also have, you can't paint a drawing, to me. You paint a painting and you draw a drawing.
Yeah.
But you're saying, where's the step? You graffiti a graffiti? No, you draw a graffiti or you paint graffiti. And so then it's on the same level. That's second tier. It's on the same level as those things. That doesn't make sense. You don't paint, I mean, it's a bad example, like paint a sculpture or draw a sculpture, because then the wording and the semantics, like, yeah, you draw a sketch of what your sculpture will be. But I mean, it comes with that word. Like, you draw a drawing. You can't paint a drawing, right? So therefore, how do you paint a graffiti?
With spray paint.
No, you're talking about the medium. So if we have medium on the bottom, and then the whatever we call it, style of art in the middle, and then on the top is whatever, I don't know what we call it, content form or whatever, a top tier. So like, to me, when you paint,
okay, so
you paint a portrait and you can paint it with these mediums.
Right.
But you can, we talk about the act of painting is different than the act of drawing. You can't use the same mediums to create that act. Right? Okay. But with graffiti...
Now I see where you're going.
Yeah, so graffiti, you use the act of drawing to create graffiti, and you can't do that if they're on the same tier. Because then it's at the top because you're using these different things in the middle to create it. And to me, the form is different. Like, to me, a portrait would be defined by the face. And so, I mean, what do you call letters? It's different from a landscape. It's different from abstract. Abstract or non-objective work is the absence of specific form. It's the absence
Why isn't
of
graffiti? Why isn't the lettering? Why isn't that just called calligraphy?
I don't know. Maybe it should be then. I guess it's because calligraphy is always flat. That would be my answer to that. Because graffiti, I've never seen 3D calligraphy.
Well, so it looks 3D. Sure.
I've never seen 3D calligraphy. I see. It's always flat. Like, I've never seen someone create.
I'll have to look it up now.
Yeah.
I used to do calligraphy. No, because you have, like, people have always done those, like, bubble letters and stuff like that. That have, those like bubble letters, like you do like the L and it sort of looked like a pillow, because it was bubbled.
With calligraphy.
Yeah, well, I don't know, just lettering. I don't know. I'll have to look it up. When we're done, I'll have to look it up and see.
Because I guess that's the thing we run into too, is because if we have calligraphy at the top, how do we differentiate that from graffiti? I never thought about that. Because calligraphy, I would say, is defined by the same thing graffiti is, and that doesn't make any sense. If it's stylized letters, because calligraphy isn't just, I wrote my name in block letters and that was it. I mean, block letters could be a style. But I mean, like, I didn't just write it just without any intent to have style. Calligraphy, to me, always has style.
Yeah,
that's its intent
but
and
the
purpose.
Calligraphy isn't, the style isn't necessarily, they have a
calligraphy?
Yeah, calligraphy. Calligraphy is a visual art, so they do describe it as visual art related to writing. It is a design execution of lettering with a broad tip instrument, brush, or other writing instruments. A contemporary calligraphic, I don't know, practice can be defined as the art of giving form to signs in an expressive, harmonious, and skillful manner.
Holy fluff. That thing's long. And one thing that already is annoying to me about that definition is the fact that it specifies broad tip, and then in the next couple words it just says, or any type of instrument. Well, why put broad tip in there?
Yeah.
Like, just say, it's any type of instrument you could do. So then it gets confusing, because calligraphy usually is a much thicker line. It's a thick line. But
so, calligraphy is an art form that combines calligraphy, typography, and graffiti. It can be classified as either abstract expressionism or abstract vandalism.
How does I don't know who wrote that, but that sounds
that's hilarious.
Stupid. That sounds dumb. I mean, if you had an abstract work, you wouldn't have text in it because it's form, and it's supposed to be non-objective, and that's an object.
Yeah.
So I don't know who the heck wrote that, but I'm gonna call him dumb.
All right.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know. But that does, the calligraphy thing definitely throws a whole wrench into graffiti, unless calligraphy was under the umbrella of graffiti. Then it would make sense to me, but I've never thought of because I mean, to me, if it's under stylized letters, then calligraphy is, I mean, calligraphy tends to be way more cursive a lot of the time, and that's a style of lettering, and then if stylized letters is graffiti, like I said, you've got straight letters, block letters, or if you're trying to make a specific style, calligraphy could be a style of graffiti. I guess that's how I just answered that myself.
So calligraphy could be a style of graffiti.
If graffiti is defined by stylized letters, calligraphy is a style of letters.
So why isn't graffiti a style of, like, why wouldn't it be the opposite way?
A style of calligraphy?
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's calligraphy is too specific. Because graffiti has, when you think of graffiti and what I think of graffiti, I think a lot of times we see something, so if it's tagging, to me, that's the most comparable thing to regular calligraphy there is. It is calligraphy to me because it is, instead of writing a whole sentence or something, when a lot of people have like really like quotes done in calligraphy or whatever, it's one word usually, or it's like 3 words or something if it's like a crew name, whatever. Let's go with one word. If I'm tagging my name or whatever my moniker is or what have you, alias, whatever that word is, it is flat. Like that's what defines a tag for me. There's no 3Ding of it at all. There's no shadow, whatever. And anytime I thought of calligraphy or seen it, it's the same thing. It's a stylized
definitely
line.
has shadows.
Definitely
has shadows. That's, now that you said that, it definitely has shadows to make the letters look raised off the page.
But is there not just flat calligraphy?
Well, yeah, but it's to have shadows, so that is to have depth.
All of them? I mean, Seb Lester.
Not all of them.
Okay, yeah, but okay. So whenever I thought of calligraphy, yeah, I guess you could have shadows the same way you could have it in a shadow on a, like digitally, right? You can create a shadow on the text, on digital text.
Yeah.
But that still is different than calligraphy to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still defined by having some 3D, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either. I think that graffiti includes more than I guess calligraphy could. Calligraphy, yeah. So let's say it has a 3D. It could have a 3D element, or it could be flat. So that could be the same as graffiti. And then, could you call? I don't know.
Calligraphy can't really be at the top because if we're doing that same way, then we can't have like a photograph. Oh, no, I'm getting so confused.
No, I think
yeah, because then they are underneath and they are drawing photographs, whatever. So if you have calligraphy, you don't really have. I mean, you could have a picture.
Could you have a
like
sculpture of calligraphy?
Yeah, definitely.
You could have a sculpture of calligraphy.
But you couldn't have, and you could have drawing, I guess. But yeah, of course you could have a sculpture of calligraphy. What do you mean?
I don't know. To me, it's, I don't know.
No, could you, like the lettering, like it could definitely be like a 3D.
So then what defines calligraphy again?
Stylized lettering.
Yeah, so
right?
if we just stick with stylized letters, then that's the thing with, that's how I was defining graffiti forever. So I don't know. I don't know what fits one into the other. I never think of calligraphy with color. It's a color, maybe. I never think of it being 2 different colors, or 3 or 15 different colors.
Oh, there's rainbow calligraphy. It's quite, like, it's a thing in itself. And it's all where the different inks are used, so it actually runs like a rainbow. Like, no,
Yeah.
And then there's also calligraphy that includes pictures within it, right? Throughout it, so I don't know.
I don't know either, no.
Yeah.
I still think of it as being more basic than graffiti. I don't know. That's just every calligraphy thing I've seen has been...
It's so funny because it's like calligraphy is like one of the least basic things out there.
What do you mean? I'm talking about just the form.
Yeah,
Every time I see it, I think of it as using
flat.
a flat brush,
right?
And just that's it. It's line, and it's one medium, one color at a time. Usually is what I've seen, unless there's a shadow. Sometimes I've seen a second color or a lighter black or something, right? But I mean, it's just not even a continuous line. It doesn't have to be, but sometimes It's just
Usually
line
they're
work.
not even when they look continuous, they're not.
No, yeah, they're
Mhm.
connecting. They take their hand off the page. But yeah, I don't know. It just seems so much more limiting. I've never thought of someone doing calligraphy on a train, or 3D calligraphy, or calligraphy that has either shading, I guess, like calligraphy with a shadow would make sense. Calligraphy with shading within the structure of the letter, I don't see that. Or calligraphy with accents and like, well, no, I guess no. See it has accents because there's lines sometimes that are like flaring off of a letter, and they're not part of the letter. I don't know. There's a crazy amount of similarity between the two, which would make sense.
This is the type of calligraphy I was talking about. Like, there's that really basic,
See, to me,
almost
that has nothing to
stencil-y.
do with calligraphy at all.
Well, it is. It is a type of calligraphy, though. I mean, there's all kinds that go into. Yes, there's the fancy dancy, but that's not all that calligraphy is.
Anytime I've thought of the word calligraphy, I've never thought of bubble letters. So, I guess I don't know. I've never thought of like, because what you just showed me on your screen was like just
even
bubble
like
letters.
that, right? So those are different letters that are not. They're not superscriptive. There you can almost see they've almost got like a 3D aspect to them, right?
Yeah.
Like it's here's where they have with like almost drawing type bits that go in, right? Like lettering and calligraphy is part of that.
So then I wonder if graffiti would just be a style of calligraphy.
I don't know. In a way, the way you've defined it, to me, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
If you're only doing it as stylized lettering, and it doesn't have anything to do with the illegal, it doesn't have anything to do with the spray paint, it doesn't have anything to do with any of those things, it's stylized, and I can do it with my felt pen in my sketchbook,
Yeah.
then I don't see what the difference is.
Yeah, I guess I don't either.
Like, I kind of thought that a lot of what made graffiti, part of it was that counterculture part.
Well, and the thing, for some people it is, and there's only one other person I've ever talked to that was a part of that culture. I'm sure there's more than that one person that exists, but I was making a documentary about graffiti in Saskatoon, and it was about a lot of, it had to do with city space and things like that, but we talked, there were 4 of us in a room that talked about what is graffiti, and one of those people said, the other 2 people agreed, like, yeah, stylized letters, that makes complete sense. Yeah, and all those 3 other people were tattoo artists. And so, yeah, if I tattoo that on someone, like, there's script, I mean, calligraphy and script to me they're almost the same thing. Yeah, you could have a graffiti piece on someone I would never thought of it as being calligraphy before. Because it's 3D'd in a certain way, there's filling, there's shading, there's a whole bunch of other things that could be a part of that. But this one person, one of the artists said, no, I don't agree with that at all. It's playing the game. He called it playing the game of graffiti. That's what he said. Stickers, stencils, wheat pasting, all this crap is graffiti is what he said, because he said it's playing the game of getting up, which would be and I think that is the most common usage of being like the game of getting up. So yeah, if I have stickers that say hello, my name is, and that sticker, and then I write my name in it, I mean, that's still letters to me. That's stylized letters, so to me that is. But if you just have characters, and he said, like, yeah, what if you just do characters, and there's some people that only do characters, that's it. And that one character is, you can still define that character as being that person. So it's not like, oh, I drew Mickey Mouse. It's just like, no, that character belongs to that person, and then that's whatever. Like, I can think of some people.
So then you would say, though, that wasn't graffiti,
Yeah.
even though it was a symbol that that person made.
So, yeah, like Claw, she created graffiti that was like the name CLAW. She did tagging, she did murals, she did whatever, but then she also just did the symbol of a claw, and that was it. and that symbol was it was a signature. It was the same every time. Like, I mean, not exactly the same, different colors or whatever, but I mean, there's 3, if you want to call them fingers, 3, like 1 nail on each finger, whatever. And it was a certain style of a claw, and that was her symbol. To me, that wasn't graffiti. There's someone named Groms, and they generally just do these faces, like, illegally. I mean, they put them on shirts and stuff,
Well, that's
too.
what I mean. Like, wouldn't that person call themselves a graffiti artist?
They probably would, but I mean,
Yeah.
when they don't play with letters, to me, that's not what they're doing. They're creating a character or like a portrait or whatever when they're doing that face. But yeah, like I said, like that one dude was like, no, he was really adamant. Like, no, you're playing the game of graffiti if you're getting up. If you are trying to getting up, just means putting it somewhere illegally that people are going to see, and the purpose is being seen as much as possible. So I think that is definitely what people think of when they think of graffiti. And my whole purpose of trying to take that element away from it was the fact that because there's illegality tied to it, automatically people think of it as not art. And I don't think that's where you're coming from at all. But there's a lot of people like, well, no, that's not art. That's like saying like that punk isn't music. That seemed to be like this very rigid thing of being like, no, that doesn't make any sense, because when I do it in my sketchbook, it could look, I could color it and everything, and I could put that on a wall that you pay me to do, and it would look the same whether you paid me or not paid me. So is that art or is it not art? If it looks exactly the same, it can't just be, I can't think of any other style of art that, oh, now it's not art because I didn't give you permission. Oh, but it is art now because I paid you. And that's what doesn't make sense to me, because it's purely aesthetic to me. Like, art styles are purely an aesthetic thing. I don't know how not you, but I don't know how anyone can take its genre away because it's illegal or illegal.
Well, I think the reason I dislike tagging so much, and when I describe tagging, I'm describing it looks like half the time like a paint pen or a felt pen or just a spray can, and it's just, let's say Laura Lee, and it's just like my name, and I just go long, and I just do it as much as I can, as often as I can, and it basically looks like shit. Like maybe I did my lettering cool because I'm a cool chick, but I mean basically that it's everywhere, and I've done it like without care, without like going across people's buildings, like not even thinking about where I'm doing things and how I'm doing things, and it's just I don't know, it's like that's the part that I don't like, is sort of this masturbatory throwing out of my name all over the place and just putting it everywhere, and that's what I think a lot of people don't like about graffiti. And I think when if people did, I mean, I think that's what people don't like about graffiti, and that's what's given it a bad name. And there's people who could argue, and especially me, saying that I thought it was counterculture, I could argue as to how that's actually important. But I mean, that's what's given it a bad name. That's what people dislike when they say graffiti, I think.
Yeah. Well,
I think most people would say on the side of trains they like. I can't think of very many people I know or talk to that don't like the way graffiti looks like on the side of trains. And usually that is just
See, but this is the thing I would take away. Graffiti, like because I think when you see it automatically, do you not think of it as graffiti? You're like, oh, that's graffiti. Yeah, but you also see the tagging as graffiti too. And before you mentioned like good and bad, but I mean it's such a spectrum of whatever. So to me, addressing the tagging thing, so the way that you identify tagging, to me that's like, oh, this is a signature, it's flat. There's no other element to it, so to me it's like a signature, it's calligraphy. Like the way I was thinking of calligraphy before as being a flat line work. That's whenever I've said tagging before, I've just called it line work. Because I'm not making it 3D, I'm not filling it. There's like different styles of graffiti that would involve just different things. So the act of tagging is just creating a tag multiple times. Usually it's the quickest way of getting up with your name. It's quick, it's easy, you're not spending time creating what I would call a letter structure, or what you showed me was a bubble letter. And then you have things that are like hollows, which would be like a throw up, which is a bubble letter that doesn't have a filling, and then you've got other, whatever, and then bombs could have fillings, and then pieces are like really, really detailed, many colors, usually 3D, and sometimes not, having a thing called a one shot. Like there's all these different elements, and this is the most basic element of graffiti, will just be line work, and that's it. So if you had, like you said, oh, it could even look really cool, but usually it doesn't. But if you had your name that you had in like a beautiful script or whatever, and you had it boom, 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 like every 10 feet, I think is what you said earlier, that's what looks like crap, and you said that's what people don't like seeing.
And because where they put them.
Yes, but let's say you just look at one, it's on the side of a mailbox, let's say, but like, oh wow, that's a really beautiful...
But you can't talk about one without the other. You can't just get me to look... Yes, I might be able to just look at one of those and say, okay, yeah, the way they put together is cool. But you can't have one without the other, because the whole thing that makes the whole graffiti part that people don't like is that the doing it without care, the doing it with...
I understand what you're saying. I'm not arguing that. I'm just trying to say that if you took that one thing that you even say you like, and to me the quality has nothing to do with if it's art or not, or if it's whatever, but if you took that one thing and then you put it on paper and you had a mat and you had a frame, to me it's still a tag and it's still graffiti, because the aesthetic quality of it is exactly the same. Like, because you could frame a portrait and you could frame a land, whatever, right? You could frame a picture, you could not. You could frame a stencil that looks really interesting, like, and then, but the frame doesn't make it more or less a landscape.
No.
So the frame doesn't. I'm just saying that one thing doesn't make it more or less a tag. It's still a tag.
Could be a drawing. If I've used a felt pen and done whatever.
Yeah, it's a drawing of.
I don't know.
It's
are you saying now you can have a drawing of graffiti? Like now.
Well, that's why I was saying graffiti was always at the top, because you could draw graffiti, you could paint graffiti, you could make a 3D sculpture that is graffiti. That's why to me it was always at the top, not on the bottom. Right. But so I understand what you're saying. I'm not taking away from that. Yeah, when you see it and it's someone's been out tagging and you see it all over the place, and that's the purpose and intention, and that's what's angering people. That's what they're calling graffiti. But if I just had that above a gallery, like my name, like the gallery name, let's say it was FK Arts Gallery, but if I just put FK Arts on the street, people aren't associating those two things, but visually they're exactly the same thing.
No, I think, yes, in the streets it's not going to have the same cachet as in a gallery. However, if you are putting FK Arts on the back of my historical building, that's shitty. Like, that's not a cool thing to do.
Well, I know. I'm just talking about the visual aesthetic. That's it.
I know, but even what you could have in your gallery wall could be exactly the same as what you put on the back of my building.
Yeah, I know. And I'm saying that's still graffiti inside or outside. That's how I feel, and that's why I feel the same thing about the sketchbook. That's why, or whatever. Like, wherever it is, to me, I want to define using letters as different from a portrait, because it's different. Because a portrait... or landscape or whatever.
I guess, I mean... We then did go to that one spot with what's the difference between calligraphy and graffiti then, and so I'm not sure about that one yet.
And it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting if we ended up being like, okay, well let's just switch. Let's just say that. What if we just define graffiti as, and I don't want to do this because of the, like, if we want to talk about politics and stuff like that and whatever, which I guess we can in a second, but what if we just called this is calligraphy and graffiti is a style of calligraphy, and what defines graffiti is the fact that it's calligraphy done illegally.
Well, no, because we just,
No, but I mean, like, what, like, would that be, like, I don't like it, but there's reasons I don't like it. But what if calligraphy was, if calligraphy is stylized letters and graffiti is stylized letters, then graffiti would just be...
Is graffiti always illegal though?
No, see, to me it's not.
No,
because if we do that,
so that's not a good.
No, it's not good for me. But I'm just saying, how can we possibly say that?
Well, we already got rid of that. You and I already got rid of the whole legal thing, right? So
well, to me that's the biggest hurdle, because to me that's the biggest thing. Because then Pat's definition when he was like, "This is a game of getting up," because I'm saying, because then to me that has nothing to do with art. So maybe that's the whole thing. He's like, "Yeah, graffiti's not art then." Like you can't. To me, you need consistency is what you need. So either it is art or it's not art. Where you place it does not determine whether it's art or not. The medium you use does not determine it art or not. It is just an aesthetic style of art, and whether it's crappy or not, it's again the intention. So if the intention is getting up, to me that doesn't take away from the art if you intended your thing to be art in the first place. But if you say, I want my art to just be everywhere. Okay, so if we talk about the Shepherd Fairy thing, so like at first the political message wasn't even meant to be a political message of like obey, like Andre the Giant, obey, sticker, wheat pasting, and like stencil. Like it was a joke at first, had no political, nothing at all, and then it became a thing that he turned it into something he was already interested in, which is talking about, how would you define it? Like consumer culture, basically. To me, it still ends up being a joke because of how it's consumed and people don't understand it. Because of like how it's like streetwear now, basically, right? But it's being like, oh, I want you to look at me and consume me either with your eyes or with whatever, or if it's consumerism and stuff like that, just obey what I say that I'm communicating to you because I'm an authority. Anyway, but I mean that to me never, that had this political message. It was art. So in the same way that I feel like I'm getting in a Celtic knot here. So like, I don't even remember what I was trying to say at first. So now I can't remember where I'm trying to end up. The legality of it, to me, didn't change the aesthetic of it. It changed the importance. So like, GATS is an acronym for Graffiti Against the System, which is just one dude who like almost never writes his name. It's just these faces that are different faces, but they're in a similar style that you always know it's him. And his whole thing is, it's art because it's illegal. To him, the political act of doing it illegally is that expression, using your voice, and that's what defines it as art, is saying, I'm not, like, to him that political act or that act of forcing yourself to be heard is what makes it important. The importance makes it art for him. So, but he also does things legally too, and it looks visually exactly the same. So, I still, yeah, like you said, we got rid of that legal thing. You and I did, but then...
Well, I mean, just like regular art forms and trying to define art in itself, graffiti artists have a wide varying definition of what graffiti is and what, right? Like, it's not like there's like graffiti is this. It's not like it's stylized lettering and that's what graffiti is. Like, there's tons of different definitions, and
that's the problem, I think, because an abstract artist can't... I mean, I already have a problem with defining someone, because usually someone saying someone is a graffiti artist means that all they do is graffiti. If you're an abstract artist, all you do is abstracts. And I know very few artists that would define themselves as, I am a something artist. There's an artist who does this and an artist who does that style and whatever, right?
Right.
But abstract...
graffiti artists describe themselves as graffiti artists?
They usually don't, because
Right.
I think it pigeonholes them. If they consider themselves an artist at all, they would never say that.
Right.
But that's the thing, is people who go out tagging and stuff or whatever, or just work with... I don't know. I feel like anyone who considers themselves an artist is using more than one medium and using more than one style, generally, to express whatever they're expressing, because sometimes one thing doesn't do it. But again, if the visuals are the same, how do you differentiate it from something else? Like, that's what it all comes down to, and why the definition needs to be there for me, because abstract means something specific. It means that there's no objects involved. There's no form that's like a specific, like a person. There's no building. There's no shapes that are definable. Geometric shapes to me don't like. I mean, that could be a point of contention whether they belong in an abstract or not. But like a portrait, again, means that I have a face. Or a human figure, it means I'm using the human figure. So I can't have a human figure piece be a painting of a mountain. That doesn't, unless it resembles a figure of a human. So the whole thing is, if I'm just working with letters, then it's visually different from these other things. It belongs in its own genre and purely on its aesthetic quality.
All right.
I don't know. Like I said, my own reasons for wanting to differentiate it so much from the legality thing.
I get that. I mean, the legality, I get why you want to pull it away from there. I mean, so if you're going to talk about art, then not talking about I get that. It not only being defined by it absolutely having to be illegal. So I understand that. And there's a ton of graffiti, and it would be by your same standards. And I think we even had one here in town, didn't we? Who had just lettering, stylized lettering.
Oh, like the in the alley, like.
No,
What you're talking
didn't we have somebody in the brick and mortar or something that just had stylized lettering?
No, but I know what you're talking about now. It's from Calgary, and I forget his name.
Okay.
Something white. But he had lettering included with these like Renaissance style, not Renaissance, whatever. These like figures. There's figures, and then they had letters with them. And I would say some of that was calligraphy, and some of it was graffiti, whatever, just the style of letters.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I understand you like pulling those away. I don't think you've convinced me the difference, like why it has to be just stylized lettering, because you can't convince me why that's not calligraphy. So therefore,
No,
I can't.
That, do that.
Then I'm not convinced why it can't be a face or something. So, like to me, I can't see why it can't be more than just stylized lettering. So I'm not convinced about that. I understand like the hierarchy of materials and mediums and categories
mediums,
and whatever, and then putting graffiti up there. It's just that then I can't figure out, is calligraphy then something you're using to make graffiti? So I don't know. So that's where but I totally have come away definitely with thinking about it differently. I kind of wish it did have still a bit more of that counterculture that was smart, rather than just sometimes the counterculture, especially around here where we don't get to see a ton of graffiti, is just sort of is dumb it is illegal counterculture. It's not meant, they're not trying to do anything else with it, and so then it gets lumped in with calligraphy graffiti when it's not.
The thing, if you put calligraphy and graffiti on the exact same...
I just countered myself, right?
Well, I was going to say, if you put calligraphy and graffiti on the same level, why can't you understand how I was thinking of graffiti? Because calligraphy has nothing to do with faces. Calligraphy is nothing, you know what I mean?
You can use calligraphy to make faces and make... I did a thing for my dad, and I did a guy on a guitar, and it's all calligraphy.
Yeah, you could use letters to create a portrait, I guess.
Yeah.
But you could use tiny pictures of mountains to create a portrait. So you've got a landscape. Well, I wouldn't call it a landscape. I'd call it, at the end of the day, it's a portrait.
Yeah.
So it's a portrait.
So it's a portrait.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you use pointillism, that's a style of portrait or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. To me, I guess that's still, at the end of the day, the focus is the face. What you use to make up the face doesn't define the fact that it's a portrait, or take away from it being a portrait.
Right.
So if you used a bunch of faces to make letters, it's not a portrait. What is it? It's either calligraphy or graffiti or whatever. Because the focus is the letters, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that's always going to be different than the face thing. I don't know. I think it's such an anomaly, and I don't think it needs to be. And like I said, yeah, you understand the reasons I want to take it away, because there's all this negative stigma. So when I was like interning and talking to grade 10s about public art, we talked about graffiti and what blah blah blah, and then someone's like, "Isn't graffiti illegal?" I'm like, "You think it's illegal to write this on the whiteboard right now, or on in your sketchbook?" Like, they were legitimately concerned. I'm like, I mean, first of all, whatever. I don't know what's going on with your brain at that point.
Well,
but
that's not fair, though.
What I mean, it's your property in your sketchbook, and you think that whatever you put there is going to be illegal. I'm just saying there's like a disconnect with reality, like with just not thinking that through. But I'm just saying, but it's also just that to me showed how negatively stigmatized a certain style of letters would be.
Yeah.
It's like, that looks like graffiti, and I know that graffiti is illegal.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it's not, because it's here, and it's fine. This is my property, this is the school's property. And it's like, the whiteboard is the school property, and I can erase it. It's not damaging anything. Damaging it would be vandalism. And again, I always go to, I don't know why, the Mona Lisa, because it's just like, so everyone knows what it is. It's like, if I did that, or if I did Starry Night, illegally, that's not graffiti, it's vandalism. It's still the same exact thing. It's a landscape if it's Starry Night, it's a portrait if it's the Mona Lisa.
But when you did say about throwing a brick through my window or doing a Mona Lisa on my window, I'd be equally pissed off.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But they're two different.
I know.
Well, one's a style of art and one is not at all.
Yeah.
But they're both vandalism,
Yeah.
and neither of them is graffiti.
Right.
To me, because they don't include letters.
I'm just saying, like, to me, that's not like pretty graffiti that I would be okay with.
Yeah, to
If
me
it's
it's not
somewhere.
graffiti at all, but
I know.
yeah. I don't know. I that calligraphy thing is really interesting, and I think that's like a, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to do with that anymore. I don't know how to, because if it's, yeah, that is stylized letters. That's exactly how I would define calligraphy. I just never thought of it before.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's not my regular, even if you write in cursive every day, I don't think that's calligraphy, because the intention is not to have this one thing be a focus as art or design.
Yeah, cursive isn't calligraphy for sure.
No, but I think if you, all of a sudden, let's say you have cursive writing, but it's one letter with a broad brush, that could be calligraphy to me. The way that I've seen it, it could easily be calligraphy. But its intention is to just be that.
Yeah.
It's not intention to be, I'm not writing
Yeah.
my novel in handwriting in calligraphy, even though it would be, oh, yeah. This is why art is amazing. And I don't know, this, yeah, I don't know. It definitely, like I said, this whole conversation is, I'm glad we got to that thing with calligraphy, because it just like, I completely overlooked that for years.
Yeah.
Years and years and years. I've been talking about this for a decade.
Yeah.
About, and there was a newspaper article, and they titled it "Fighting for Graffiti's Acceptance." And part of this, with like, there's all these arguments and whatever. Everything that I've used as definitions as to yes, why or why not, or blah 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 blah. Like, how to define this from a different art form and call it an art form and make sure that people know it's an art form or whatever. Again, it's to legitimize the fact that this can be art. And so, yeah, taking it away from this, taking it away from that, and to categorize it in its own thing, I don't know. Again, it's so mixed up. That's the problem. It needs to be, like, if it was originally, graffiti is a style of calligraphy that is illegal, if that was how I grew up knowing that, I never would have had a problem with it. But that's because it's very specific again. Calligraphy, letters, graffiti, letters. Where you put the letters makes it graffiti or calligraphy. Even if that was a thing, no problem. If it becomes too broad and I don't understand, like, because then no one can ever say that graffiti wouldn't be a style of art if calligraphy is a style of art. It'd be like, yeah, just where you put it makes that distinction.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen with anything else. Like, well, I mean, it does. If you think of like, oh, I did a character, or I did a portrait illegally, that's graffiti because you did it with spray paint, you did it illegally on the side of a building, so now it's graffiti. And I just don't. That they completely negate the fact that it's a style of art by calling it graffiti. Is how I look at it.
Well, because we're not taught that. We're not taught that it is, right? I mean, so you have to unpack what we're taught, and that's not easy to do, right? So whereas we're taught that a drawing is art, we're taught the painting is art. So to be able to then unpack, sort of talking about graffiti and what it is and if it's art, and just because it's legal or not legal, and if because for you, then the way you defined it doesn't matter if it's legal or not.
Yeah.
Then it's art, right? So, and it seems like by them having different graffiti, they have art shows now that are completely graffiti.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we talked about one last time with the We Needy Graffiti is what it's called, at SkyApp, at Artist One Centers and stuff, and that whole thing is based off of, it needs to be in this style. And what is that style? Like, but I wonder, because I don't remember, because there were so many different artists involved, I wonder if someone did have characters and no letters. Because then I would have been like, why is that here? I would have thought
Would
that.
you have by then?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would have been like, why is that here? I remember there were some 3D pieces made out of wood, but like one of them was Acme, and it said ACME, and it was like in this wood thing that they like carved out, and it was like, yeah, that's just 3D graffiti.
Yeah.
I don't know. Ugh. This is why I think it's like, I don't know, this whole thing was good practice, and I'm glad we got to this point, because I think it's important as an artist, and we've talked about this before, is defining art for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's interesting, to me, what's interesting is like how words change meaning over time, and why do they change meaning? Why does someone have a definition in mind, or there's a common usage thing? It's like, well, when people tell you not to take things literally sometimes, I'm like, no, but that's what the word means. They're like, yeah, but you know that's not what I meant by it. And that whole thing with language just fascinates me, because like we're trying to communicate, we're using the same language, and yet we're not on the same page, and that's weird. So something like this, which again is really personal to me, because I've participated in that culture illegally, and I would say legally because of how I transferred that style onto canvas and whatever else, and like, again, to me the art style is just defined by its visual quality and aesthetic property or whatever that differentiates it from a different genre. Now I lost my train of thought again. Again, I just think it's important, like, it's interesting that if you are the one creating something, how you apparently don't have enough strength to actually change the definition. Because that's what I feel like with graffiti. It's not going to change. Mm-hmm. Like, I really don't think it's ever going to change. No matter how many people are like, hey, you know those things that you call graffiti, we do that, and we don't want it to be a part of this other thing that you also call graffiti. It doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's ever going to be a thing, and to me that's wild, because it seems like I fell into the definition of abstract art, and what the definition is, I still have, like I said, there's like a point of contention of like, well, if we put a triangle in here, is that still abstract? It's like, well, no, because that's an object, and abstracts are supposed to be synonymous with non-objective, and that is a recognizable geometric shape. And then that symbol, you might have meaning attached to that. There's 3 points to it, or 3 has all the symbolism of like whatever, right? And that's, to me, that means it's non-objective. Someone else might make abstract work with symbols in it like that. Mm-hmm. And then you can get into geometric symbols versus organic, or geometric shapes versus organic shapes. They're still shapes. I don't know. It's interesting because even, like I said, I just fell into abstract, and then I want to defend what it is, and there shouldn't be points of contention, but there are. And I don't know. I think it's all art. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going anymore.
I don't. But I mean, I guess the whole reason for having the podcast is being able to talk about things, challenge different descriptions, learn, like, you know, I'm learning from you different descriptions of what things are. We can challenge each other, that kind of thing. I don't know. I think it's, yeah, I guess that's...
Yeah, I've been, I don't know, okay. For some reason, like, after we hit halfway in this thing, I felt like I got more steam now than I did before. I don't know. We hit a certain thing that opened it up, and I think it was the calligraphy thing, but it might have been before that. And I keep trying to wrap it up in my own way and failing. But what you were saying just also reminded me, I just thought of the fact that, like, again, the other day, I was listening to another art podcast called Disturbing the Peace that you introduced me to, and I haven't gotten very far in it yet, and it hasn't really improved in quality yet. And I thought it was really weird. She was interviewing someone about DIY, do-it-yourself culture, or like DIY art. And what does that mean? To me, I'm like, well, what? Like, every art is doing it yourself, whatever. But they're like, no, this is a very specific subgenre of art. And then this person started lumping in, I just let the name escape me. Vaporwave. So vaporwave is an aesthetic that is visual, but it's also a type of music. It's a genre of music is really what it is. But that genre of music is usually accompanied by visuals. Those visuals are very mid-90s. There's a lot of symbolism of, for some reason, they mix like Windows 95 very specifically, the color teal, the color pink, white, and then somehow like marble statues from antiquity, like David and stuff like that. that aesthetic is involved to create vaporwave. But vaporwave is a style of music. But this person was talking about DIY culture and how vaporwave is a big part of it, and I was like, you don't make any sense. I don't know where you're coming from. This seems like maybe a regional thing for you. I don't get it, because that's just not. And this thing was only like a year ago, and I was like, this has nothing to do. So anyway, in that podcast, I was just like, this is not my understanding of the thing you're talking about. And that leads me to the thing of just being how music lately, a lot of people or a lot of things that I've seen have talked about, like articles that are online or whatever, being like, you know what? What is this now? Generation Z? Is that what we're on?
Yeah.
How Generation Z has destroyed the genre. That music is not, there's no genres of music anymore because they have combined so many things sometimes that it doesn't fit into one style. That we've got, it's not like, okay, well, we had metal and we had rap and now we have new metal. Or we have rap rock or something like that. It's like some people have crammed so many things into one that like,
What's wrong with that?
there's nothing wrong with it. I'm getting to the fact that maybe destroying the genre is what it's starting to happen anyway, and we're just saying this is music.
Mm-hmm.
It's pop music. It's also metal. It's also rap. Like that because it contains all those elements to such a strong degree that it can't be in one of those things.
You're telling me that there could be a song that I could listen to that I wasn't sure if it was metal or pop? Or
absolutely,
like,
I would think of baby metal right now, and I think you would probably think, yeah, that's metal. But there's such strong elements of pop.
No, I'm not saying elements in it though, because you can. Now we're getting like way off track. But I mean, you can have elements into certain things, but still there's a genre that comes to your mind. Yes, it pulls from different elements, but
not just that. I mean, if you took 30 seconds of the song by itself without the rest of the context, it's not like, oh, this has pop elements, but it's obviously metal the whole time. You could take 30 seconds of that right out, put it here, it's just on pop radio. That's it. There's no blast beats, there's no anything else in there that would call it metal. It just like switches. But that's like saying rap rock. Well, it's like, well, if you just took this one section, it's just a really hard rap song. Because there's no screaming involved, because there's no double bass kicks, there's no whatever, it's just rap. But in the context, oh, now you just put a hyphen and call it the thing. But now there's some things that are just so, you've got 4 different things in there, so you can't call it, it's not just putting a hyphen in between 2 different genres anymore. Like, I don't know. I just think that that's a place that I think that I would be happy getting to, because it would destroy this whole argument, and then, or not argument, but this whole discussion, which is great to have. But I think that if we get to that place, and some, like, I feel like we discussed this to such a point that I realized, like, again, because I don't like being pigeonholed as any type of artist at all, that I'm like, yeah, it's just all art. It's all just art. And then we're defining art. I find it better to define one thing than define everything underneath art. Because why do we need to? It's like, okay, visual art is different than music. Music is art too. But then, I guess no matter what, we've got these tiers. Because we have to define art first, and that's my definition will be different from that dude over there walking across the street, his definition of art. But there's just this one thing, and then there's umbrellas of that, and then there's tiers under that. Because, yeah, music is art, and music is not the same as visual art. And that's not the same as writing, if that's going to be art. And then that's that second tier, and then, it just keeps going and going. But if we can eliminate as many subgenres as possible, that would be better. And so I don't even, because the subgenre thing at a point, I mean, it happens is with metal all the time, especially now. We've gotten to such a place where there's not oversaturation. It's so much saturation of humans on the planet, people creating music, people that like metal, that are doing things different and pushing what it is. It's fantastic and great, but then why do we have to subscribe a certain name to it?
Yeah, exactly.
Because then it's like, well, hardcore was one thing, and then metal, and then now it's metalcore.
Well, there's a cajillion goths now.
Yeah,
You
pastel
can't just
goth.
have goth.
And that's
you
the
gotta have
thing.
like a million types of goth.
Yeah.
It's like, oh.
Having goth and then pastel goth is like, well, that completely erases the whole black part of defining goth if you were using pastel colors. Anyway, I'm really curious as to what we're going to title this thing now, because I feel like, but I mean, it's, I don't know, destroying the genre. That could have been a whole other podcast.
It could have, and maybe it will be.
Yeah, okay, so we'll just end right there. But yeah, whew.
Yeah, defining. Is that artist life?
Yes, that is our artist life.
It's a hard artist life.
It is, but it's fantastic.